Hello everyone and welcome to another collage and acrylic video. Today I'm going to be looking at still life and abstracting out using shape, texture and colour. I have a random selection of objects here and I'm going to take elements of each of one of these. I'm not going to be literally painting, collaging the objects themselves. I'm going to be taking areas of interest that I can see. Now, looking at this selection, what I really like is this shape of the handle going round to the spout on this jug. I like the colouring here and I like the pattern. I also like this texture. I like the shapes on the ball. I think that would lend itself very nicely to collage. And also I was particularly struck by this vase with the metal and the decoration, the ceramic decoration inside. So I'm thinking of using something to emulate that, not to have it identical to that, but just something that will represent that. So I try to get the object so there's a lot of movement in there because I'm aiming to have a lot of movement in my painting. I have here some washers and nuts, and I thought this would be very interesting to put on my painting, and I thought that these would echo the metal of the bowl and also the roundness of the balls. I'll put those up there. I have some Crackle Glaze. I've never used this before, so I thought this might be quite interesting to use to get the texture of the jug. I don't know how it'll pan out, but I've thought what I might do is paint some turquoise on the jug, on the shape that I'm going to do, and then use Crackle Glaze in a white or cream on top and see what happens. So I can add that to my collection. I have a palette knife, which I might use for a little bit of textural painting. Newspaper, in particular crosswords, which I thought might echo a little bit the pattern that's on the side of the jug with the black lines, and I thought I might use a bit of colour and glazing on them. These crosswords have been done, which I think makes it more interesting, so that's something else I might add. And wire, which might be interesting to use. At the end of this video, I will be posting again a list of materials you might like to think about that are quite textural that you might want to include. Now, usually with something like this, it's a good idea to do thumbnails. So I've played with a few ideas until I finally came up with something that I felt would work quite nicely. So I started off, I really liked the circles of the balls. And I was looking for a lot of movement within my page, and I was looking, as I said, to echo this shape here on the jug. So I started off basically just putting shapes down. I was looking at composition as well, which is pretty important even with abstract, and I was looking at an S-shaped composition. However, eventually what I ended up with was a cross, which is a crucifix with the upright line being slightly slanted, and I think I sat well with that. With your composition, you can do an S or a C, letters, W. You can go with the rule of 3, which I did here, splitting your composition up into 3 and putting your focal point where the lines meet. It's very important to think about focal point, even though you're working in abstract, because you want an area that the eye rests and an area of interest, and that has to be supported with other areas which aren't quite so interesting. I'm thinking about texture as I go as well. You can see I'm putting in a little bit of texture. This is going to be palette knife painting in this area here, which is representative of the petals of the flower, and also my palette knife is exactly the right shape to do that. And these are going to be the washers because I think they're quite a focal point. And I'm going to use down here, I had the idea I'd use the crosswords as part of the background, and I'm just going to play with it and develop it as I go, and if I change my mind about things then I'll just use something else. So anyway, to begin, I'm going to use a dark turquoise, so I'm just going to mix some phthalo green with some cobalt blue and a touch of red to dull it down a bit. I'm actually mixing it on the painting. What I've done is I've painted over an old demonstration that I did, and I've used quite a thick white paint. You don't necessarily have to use thick paint to get texture. You can use some gesso underneath. bit too green. The reason I'm not worried about using the actual picture itself is because I'll be painting over that anyway. I'm using System 3 acrylic for the most part with a little bit of golden. I bought the cheapest System 3 just to explore it with collage, and it's very weak. Anyway, to begin, I've got to get my rough so I can see what I'm doing. At this point, you can actually start to dismiss the still life because you're not trying to get a representation of it. This is where the process takes over, and you can use your imagination and your inspiration from the material. So I'm just going to put in my basic lines that I was using as my structure. One went down there, and then about 2/3 of the way up. And the shape of the spout and handle are quite important. I want it to flow nicely. So up to about here, it curves over. It dropped down to about this point, and maybe I could curve it a bit, oops, a bit more. Gone all over the place there. And over up to there. About the same height as this. What I could do is raise this up a little bit and slightly lower that. Then making a mark there so I know where I'm going. Working my way down to there, like that. I think I'm all right with that. Did wonder if it should go across a little bit, maybe get a little bit more movement. And then I did, if you see on the rough, I did a handle that was a semicircle, and then this which was an oval, and I actually like the oval more. I think it makes it more dynamic, so I'm going to put that in. When you're looking at a theme, there isn't a particular theme within this, although you could say it's going to be textural. When you're looking at a particular theme, you can go with man-made, you can go with natural objects, found objects, beach objects. So you can have subject matter can be a theme, or you can have a textures as a theme, or you might want to have line as a theme, or shape, or colour, or tonal value. You might even want to do something in monochrome just using tonal values. I'm not sure in the middle here where I'm going to put my washers, so what I'll do with that is I'll just leave that and put those on afterwards. So I've got a stem in the way, which I will try and get rid of while I'm painting this. So these could actually arch over to there and then come down to here, maybe over a bit. Yeah, quite like that. So put that in there, and then I did like having the other slim line or slim shape arching over here like that, and I think I'm happy with that. So I'm going to take the paint that's left on here and put it on my palette, possibly for use as I go. And then I'll just pull that out over there and around here for a little bit of texture. This line can go, and this line, I don't think I need those anymore. So now what I'm going to be doing is looking at working from the background to the foreground. So I think I'll start with my palette knife painting, or I could start, I'm really excited about using the Crackle Glaze. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint this turquoise, and then I'll be going over it in a cream, I think, and see what happens with the Crackle Glaze. If nothing happens, what we'll be doing again, we'll be painting turquoise over it again, and then I'll be painting PVA on top of the turquoise and then white on top of the PVA, and that will crackle. So I will have crackle whatever way I do it. Mixing up my turquoise, phthalo green. I couldn't get Viridian. I think Viridian makes better bright turquoise, but I don't really want a bright turquoise. I'm carefully looking at the colour because I do like that turquoise that's over there on the jug. Actually, I'll take my rough away, sorry, so you can see the still life as I do this. So this is slightly more green than I've got it, but I'm happy with that. So I'm going to spread this on quite thick. So now I'm going to move on to this section here, and this is, as I said, is going to be palette knife painted. I'm looking at the flowers and I think the colour's too strong. I do want this to stand out, and when I put the Crackle Glaze over it, I don't know how much turquoise is going to come through. So I think I might go for green with this, with maybe a hint of the red of the flowers. The green obviously represents the leaves. I'm going to take this colour and I'm just going to place, starting at the shape that I've got, I'm going to just place the paint on to get the texture of petals going up. So I'm really only using the tip of this. And what's happening is actually the colour underneath is coming through, which is rather nice. I'll probably have to repaint the edge of this. A bit more green maybe in places. I've had a rethink of this shape here, and I think that I'm going to paint over it white, and then I'm going to Crackle Glaze turquoise over it because I think it will stand out more. And now I'm going to build up my crossword puzzle in this area here. So I'll be using scissors rather than tearing today. I'm going to put another layer of paint on the white shape so that it builds up and is thicker. And now I'm going to be painting this line white because I'll be putting red crackle glaze over that. So going over to these areas here, I have this from last week and I really like the colour and I think it would work well. So I'm going to put this on and I'll probably just cut it into shapes or even rip it. So I think I'll rip it and put that on. So now I'm going to dispense with the still life, partly because it's irritating me and partly because I don't think I need it anymore. I'm going to concentrate on this and how I can develop it without the reference. I might bring in a little bit of reference, for instance, the patterning on the jug I do like, so I might be putting that in, but I'm going to see how I go just working on this. Now that gives me a bit more space to work, so I'm now going to use the Crackle Glaze, which I've been waiting for. I'm not sure about how much to put in, but I'll just play it by ear. So I'm going to make a turquoise, taking the Crackle Glaze. I'll just get the water off my brush. I'm going to use quite a lot, I think, and I'm going to mix a turquoise. I think that it's not going to work with that green behind. I think I need to look at colour again. It's gone grainy actually, putting it in the medium. I'm going to put some white in to lighten it. So let's see how it looks. I'm wondering if this just works afterwards, it just crackles as it dries. I'm putting it on very thickly, so this is an experiment. That is the great thing though about having a bit of fun and just doing something as a bit of an exercise, because you don't know how it's going to turn out and you make a lot of errors, but you also make a lot of accidental successes as well. As you can see, my green in the background is definitely not going to work. Don't see anything happening at the moment, it just looks a little bit coarse. I'm going to hold off doing this line until I see what happens here. I might end up painting white over it again and using the glue method. Any which way, this shape is getting thicker and thicker and is coming out in a bit of relief. So now we wait. You know what, I actually might use the glue method over here while that's drying. So I will paint glue. This glue is quite thick, so I might have to add a little bit of water to it. And now the Crackle Glaze has dried and absolutely nothing has happened. I'm going to go over this again in a white. I've also rethought my colours. I'm thinking that I'm going to do this red. It will be very strong and bold, and it will also stand out because warm colours come forward. So with that thinking, this is going to be turquoise, so it goes back into the background. And I'm thinking I might actually take this cobalt blue purple and do something here behind, so I'm actually changing the whole thing. And this is the slightly irritating thing about when you're working this way, but also the exciting thing, because you just don't know what you're going to do next. And I'm just painting over the white, and I'm putting it on quite thickly. And also into there, like that. And making sure it's covered. I'm going to mix myself some turquoise, a little bit of white. And I want to make it reasonably runny, not too runny, but a little bit less stiff than coming out of the tube. And I'm just going to very lightly, barely touching, paint over my glue. And what happens is, as this dries, the paint cracks over the glue. And I'll also put some over here. I've now decided to go over this in white, and some of that green might show through, but it will make the red stronger. So going back to my initial mark making, some of that green is showing through and I quite like that. And now the white is nearly dried, I'm going to paint over it in red. This I think is going to stand out very strongly. Might be too much. We'll see what it looks like. I'm going to make my edges very neat. And having put the red on while it dries, I'm going to put tissue over this area because I did want texture in this to balance what's going to go on here. So I'm just going to glue it up and tear off pieces. And when it's dry, I'll be painting that, I think, a warm yellow ochre actually. So I'm moving into warm colours, whereas it was supposed to be originally all cool colours. But I also want this to stand out, and not as much as the red, but enough to bring it forward. So adding a warm colour that's not as loud as the red will do that for me, I think. So I'm scrunching them this way. I'll start at the top. I'm going to mix a colour to outline this. I don't want to go with black because it's a bit harsh. I was thinking of that. I'm going to use, I think, a deep purple because this is purple. So my cadmium red deep, and I've just put some ultramarine onto my palette. Well, I'll make that a little bit more watery. And I think I'm going to use rigger. Use a bit more red. Or maybe I'll mix it into here. Nope, there's some yellow in that. It makes it dirty. So I've got my rigger. And I'm just going to run along, pressing reasonably hard so I get a wide line. What happens usually is I quite like to use a gloss varnish because it makes it look almost enamel if you put enough layers on. So what happens when you do put the varnish on is that all the different textures, the shiny textures and the matte textures will all become the same. So it will be uniform. Unless of course you like the different textures. You want to keep it with some areas matte, some areas gloss. And now while I'm waiting for the red to dry because it's still wet, I'm going to start to work a few little other areas, taking the decoration from the jug as inspiration. So now I'm going to place my washes on. I quite like this one, it's a bit like an eye. I'm just going to move them round to see where they'd look right. This I could clean off a bit actually, I quite like the shine on it. I really wanted a bigger washer as a focal point, but they don't come any bigger than this. That probably would suit there. So thinking about the rule of odds and evens, I don't want to have even amount of washers, so I'm just playing. I wondered if that would work on top of that. On there. No, that's invisible. Probably that one. About there. Maybe that one there. Small one over here. I don't want too many. I'm thinking about the cross that I had, which has disappeared somewhat. I might make this line a bit thicker to bring the eye towards these. And we will see how many. That's a little bit bigger. That might work on the outside of that one. Yeah, I think that makes an interesting focal point. I think I'll only use one of these. Let's see if that one's a little bit more brass coloured. I think that works quite well. And maybe one in there. So to stack them a little bit. Quite like that arrangement. So with my wood glue, I'm going to put an awful lot on. And it does stick them. I could paint these, or I could leave them as they are, and I'm going to leave them as they are. I was thinking of putting some collage underneath them, but I actually like them the way they are, without the collage inside. So the glue's dribbling all over the place, but that will dry invisible. So better to have a lot than not enough and to have to take everything up and stick it all down again, especially on this. As I say, I have stuck pebbles before now and they have stayed. I'm going to just fill that with glue, and then this will just sit on the top and stay as it dries. I think that can go down first, and then the washer with the teeth can go on top. Oops. Oops, knocked it over. You can build up your layers of collage so thickly using card, using, as I'm doing, metal pieces. I've seen collages that are huge and about 3 foot deep. I think that's it. So I might put one over here. The only thing about breaking this line is you lose your momentum, so I might put one in here. maybe just a small one. And actually I'm thinking of breaking the line, having a small one there. Like that. And now I'm going to have a little think about it and maybe add a little bit more. I think my focal point works quite well. I'm wondering about actually putting on that. Yep, like that as well. I have got some wire that I was thinking of using and string. I don't want to kill it, but it might be quite nice to have the twine going in between the washers, just around here for movement. Yes, I quite like that. And maybe over here. Yep. So I've got to think about where it's going to go and where it starts. Oops. I could start it down here and just bring it round like that and take it up. And I like that. And the red's still a bit tacky, so it is sticking a bit, but I think I'll use some glue. Take it around there and over here, and maybe break that line, bring it around here, have it going back on itself. It's fallen off. I think that actually should go the other way around. That might not stick. I don't think I've got enough glue on it. So we'll see how that looks. Might take it up here, maybe a little bit as well. See what works. It's a good idea actually with something like this to let the glue dry a little bit before you stick the string on. Make it, it gets a little bit tacky and then it's easier to stay. Or make it stay. As you can see, it's moving around a fair amount. Okay, gave up on that piece of string. Right, my string was too wiry, so I'm going to go with some ordinary string, which should stick quite well. But before I put it on, I'm going to paint it. And so that, I think, is just about done. And as usual, when I do a piece of artwork, I usually have a think about it, see if it needs any more or any less, or painting over, or throwing in the bin, or saving and putting on the wall. By the way, the reason I put that there is because I felt that was empty, and I felt like the movement takes you up to this area here, so I just put that on. And the angle of the bolt follows along with the lines going up, but it just kind of stops you going off the page. You end up on this and then maybe go back again. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you found it interesting, and I hope you have a go. As I said, there will be a list of different media that you can use at the end. And I look forward to seeing you next week when we'll be doing collage and acrylic landscape. That will be much more painterly and much more focused on textures. I look forward to seeing you then. Bye.